For more on how these boycotts are playing out and the response so far, I'm joined by Donovan Bennett, writer and host at Sportsnet. Kayla Gray is an anchor at TSN Sports Center, and Morgan Campbell is a senior contributor at CBC Sports. So thank you all for being here. There's so much to get to. Kayla, I'd really like to start off with you because I'm just really curious. What coursed through you the moment last night when you heard that, an NBA game was not being played, clearly a call of the players?
Yeah, I think as a Black woman, as a Black person, pride, but also sadness, because it just let me know that we are still here. Listen, we have to be very clear. It's not as though the NBA players went into the bubble thinking that visual messaging on the court, the messages that they had on their back were going to be it. We're going to solve racism. They had bigger plans. The issue is that the message just wasn't getting around and across clear enough. And I think in conversations, there was this awareness that they were the only ones in it. There was no ownership involved. There was no, other hands that needed to really play a big part. And so I think players at that point in time were like, enough is enough. If we are here and we're going to be a speaking piece, if we're going to be revisiting our trauma during our interviews to help put out a message, ownership, league, NBA, y'all got to pull up as well.
Right. So this was their call. And then Donovan, as the night unfolded and we saw more sports, more boycotts, a little bit in tennis, soccer, Major League Baseball, I'm wondering where you thought this was going.
It wasn't really surprising because basketball has been a leader, has been progressive, has been intentional. We look to COVID-19 and the fact that the NBA shut down. The other sports leagues took notice, and then the world took notice. But really conspicuous in their absence was the NHL, who had a moment of reflection in one game and not all, and not really sure what they were reflecting on. They had on their screens ending racism and skate for Black lives. I think it would have been a time to not skate for Black lives, and maybe to add another word to that, and that would be matter, and saying for the first time with their chest that Black lives matter. And so to me, my thoughts were just a juxtaposition, both on the players in the NBA and the players in the NHL, and basically the leadership. And that's why you see a juxtaposition on what their fan bases look like.
Okay, so let's talk about hockey then, because there's no question it totally stands out. And Morgan, I guess, arguably anemic moment of silence yesterday, and then the postponing of the games Thursday and Friday, does that fall into the okay, good move, or too little, too late category?
You know what the NHL reminds me? The NHL postponing games now reminds me of. Remember baseball 2015? Jose Bautista hit that big home run late in the game against the Texas Rangers, and he flipped the bat, right? And then later on, John Tory is at Nathan Phillips Square, some ceremony, and he has a bat, and he flips it too, right? So one of these was staged and boring and lame, and one of these was super and awesome and authentic, right? So the NHL is like John Tory coming in a couple days later with the staged bat flip. But here's the thing. I'm not necessarily upset with the NHL, only because all these other leagues are taking credit for postponing games, even though it was the players that decided they weren't playing. So these leagues didn't make a choice to postpone games. It's the players that said, we're not playing, we're withholding our labor. And the leagues had no choice but to postpone. So what this tells you is that unlike the NBA and the NFL when the Detroit Lions didn't practice, and unlike selected Major League Baseball teams, what you did not have in these NHL locker rooms was a critical mass of players who felt strongly enough connected to this issue to sit out for a game.
So what do you do then? Like, what becomes the takeaway from the decision of say, the NBA to resume the playoffs, Kayla?
I think, there's a big question right now of what comes next. And I think why this is so impactful and important is because we all need to wake up to realize that that's not a question that we should be asking players. That's a question that we should have been asking ourselves. And so with the players coming back, listen, it was no easy thing to decide to do, but you have to imagine that for them to come back, there is a list of demands that they are hoping ownership meets. But also the onus is on us as media, the stories that we tell, how we tell them. Again, like I said, The way that we're putting out these quotes, we're doing it in the same breath that we're retweeting these highlights, but we're not putting or applying any pressure on institutions. And if journalistic integrity is at our core, that's exactly what we should be doing. So I think it flips the mirror back at us. It flips the question back at us is how are we going to contribute? You know, I've said if mayors are so happy to make bets on playoffs and series and they're going to do this and that if someone wins or loses, they got to bring that same energy too when it comes to where they stand on anti-Black racism and police brutality. Call up your people. Call up your fellow mayors. Put some pressure. Ownership. You have billions of dollars. Money can move. Money can make change. And so I think that this just put the ball in everybody else's court because at the end of the day, we cannot look at NBA players, a predominantly Black league, to shoulder all of this, to shoulder the decision and plan making for problems that they did not create.
Okay, so good point about the owners. And Donovan, where are the owners now? Where are the sponsors now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, these things don't happen by themselves. These people are often moved by profit margins, and when they move, and we saw the Washington football team, their name changed when they had some pressure from their sponsors who had pressure from their consumers. And the NBA has more power than it lets on. They did not bring their All-Star game a couple of years to Charlotte because they felt opposed to the HB2 bathroom bill that discriminated against the LGBTQ plus community. Guess what? That bill changed, and then eventually they came with their All-Star game and their economy and their money. So if they care as much about this issue, instead of putting Black Lives Matter on the court and sayings on jerseys, the men who, together, the owners, have billions with a B dollars, but more than that, they have social and political capital. They can use that to change legislation, laws, and hopefully eventually culture as well.
So this long history of athletes stepping up for justice and human rights, predominantly Black athletes, you know, Muhammad Ali, Vietnam War, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, the Black Power podium salute. Can you give me a sense, Morgan, of where you think this moment stands in relation to those?
Yeah, what stands out to me is that this is a group of professional athletes leveraging their power and making it known that these games happen on their say-so, not on somebody else's say-so, right? Like all reports say that LeBron and the Lakers, Kawhi and the Clippers, they were ready to leave because they knew if those two teams leave the bubble, there is no playoffs. You cannot plan around a LeBron James. You cannot plan around a Kawhi Leonard at this point. We have not seen recently pro athletes put their identities as Black people before their identities as basketball players to make something happen for Black folks in general. And that's what we saw last night.
All right, one last question very quickly to each of you. We'll start with you, Morgan, then Donovan, and with Kayla. What is the place and the role in this moment for the fan?
What's the place and the role in this moment for the fan? What I would like to see fans do is the same thing I would like to see members of the mainstream media do, which I don't feel I see enough, which is to respect these athletes as human beings first, not as robots programmed to entertain, and not as one person is interchangeable with the next is interchangeable with the next in terms of his or her opinions on Black liberation. And so what I would love to see is for us in the media, you know, to stop asking players whether or not they think they have done enough.
Okay, Donovan?
Yeah, just to follow up on that point, athletes are the only people who we ask to both educate and entertain at the same time. We don't do that to comedians or actors or musicians. And I'm not really sure why we're asking the oppressed to figure out solutions for the oppressor. Really, our gaze should be on the owners, and they should be the ones who are accountable both to the fans, but also to us as the media as well.
All right, last word to you, Kayla.
Absolutely. I think it's as simple as this. If you show up for what athletes do, you better be showing up for who athletes are. I'm tired of, frankly, hearing fans talking and putting out their hashtags and this, that, and the third, and talk about allyship and listening and learning. Application needs to happen. It needs to happen now.
All right, Kayla Gray, Donovan Bennett, Morgan Campbell, thank you.
Thank you.